So when I reached Summit for the first time, I knew that this was the ending of Celeste. Since it was so climactic, from the mending of your relationship with Madeline to the climb across all the chapters that we've been oh so familiar with. Upon reaching 3,000 meters, I knew that I had to say goodbye to this game very soon. So once I actually reached the top, I felt some sort of catharsis. Because the journey to the top wasn't exactly easy. Celeste was the epitome of storytelling through gameplay. The hardships that Madeline went through were also my hardships. When she had to face her inner demons in probably one of the best gaming set pieces that I have witnessed, I felt her struggle. It was long, it was arduous, and we needed to use all of our knowledge of the game to face it so far. So once the credits rolled, I was ready to say that I have finally finished Celeste. But wait, what is this? Oh no, there's more! Well, I say oh no, but I was actually slightly happy when this happened since I had more of an excuse to play more Celeste. And after reading the comments from my first Celeste experience, I was more curious on what actually happens in these chapters. And I say chapters because there were actually 2 more. This is my journey across Celeste's endgame and the start of my masochistic awakening. I would say that Chapter 8 is the beginning of the endgame. It's the in-between of side A and B side when it comes to difficulty. But what I'm about to say next is probably one of my only 2 criticisms of Celeste, and it's the heart locations. I don't know why these were in super secretive locations in the first place, since the core is arguably one of the main parts of the main storyline. So it's weird that you can basically finish all 7 chapters and miss every single heart location. The main reason why the strawberries and cassettes worked so well as secrets is because at the end of the day, they were just extra content, and that's it. If you want to get these things, you can go for it, and it's mainly optional. But the hearts are part of the main progression, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that hearts should have been given all willy-nilly, but I would have rather them put it in a more obvious location but have very challenging platforming sections that some players or beginning players could opt out of going when they're not confident in their skills yet, so that after they finish the game and they have gained all the essential skills to tackle these said challenges, it won't be a Where's Waldo situation wherein you're just going around all the levels trying to find these hearts. Like they've already kind of done this in the first place with a lot of the Summit gems for the heart of Summit. And I thought that these challenges were pretty cool. The 2,500 gem took me 30 minutes to get, and I really like this. I think it also serves to prepare the player for harder content that comes with Chapter 8. But personally, I do think that Summit was just a lot harder than Chapter 8, but that's just my experience. But if Celeste really wanted it so that it's more fair but it's still a very secretive heart, then they should have just done what they did with the Celestial Resort's heart, where they told the player that there is a heart where it's located and that it's just in an inaccessible area. This will lead the player to dashing everywhere until you find this specific spot that tells you that there is something up there, but you have to remove this obstacle first. And once you clean up the clothes, you now have the ability to access this area. But there is one problem, or at least I have one major gripe about this. And that is that the way to get back here is through this spot. And I would have liked it more if it was less of a you found it by chance location and rather it be more intuitive. Like rather than have this spot, why not just have the option to go back and not close this off once the player enters the room? So players could intuitively be like, oh, I can't access from the front anymore, so once they play it again, they could go from the back. They can backtrack and see that there is an entirely kind of different level that's here. And I think that to begin with, I think it's a more interesting puzzle sequence rather than, oh, you got lucky that you found the right hole in this specific room. And I'm not gonna lie, some of the puzzles that came with the heart sequences were not that fun to figure out either. This is especially the case because I never expected this game to have these puzzle sequences in the first place. I think that the game could have done a better job at telling the player that there are mechanics that could be used to solve these puzzles. For example, if the game made it very clear that dashing in a specific order could get you specific effects, then solving these two puzzles would have been such a pain in the ass. The game doesn't have to tell the player that you can do these dashes in the hard puzzles themselves, but rather just earlier on. Like, imagine in the first level, or like at the very beginning of chapter 1, there's a door that you need to open by dashing in a specific order. So when a player stumbles upon a satellite with birds that look like there's some sort of puzzle sequence within it, the player could be like, oh, the game has told me before that dashing on nothing could open doors, so can it also be used in these types of puzzles? This implants that there could be puzzle sequence in the game, and dashing could be the solution for these. Rather than stumbling on this place, see a strawberry, try to fiddle with the satellite a bit, do stuff with it, and nothing working, then moving on since it might have just been a strawberry room. But some people might argue that it was very obvious for them, that there are 8 directions you can dash from, and the birds are going into 5 separate directions that are like in a compass shape. And the machine was blinking a specific order of colors that correspond with each bird. But you have to remember that people came into Celeste thinking that it was only a platformer, like me. Expectations matter a lot when it comes to this regard, since if I'm entering a game like Escape the Backrooms, I would have the mindset that there will be a lot of puzzles in this game. And not only puzzles, but there are puzzles that require you to stretch a bit for them to even make sense in the first place. And that's the whole game. That's what makes it make sense. And you know the thing that I was talking about earlier about implanting the idea that there are puzzles in this game and it can be solved with dashes? Celeste kind of does something very similar when it comes to the cassettes and strawberries. You get cassettes and strawberries from looking for secrets and doing challenges. And the thing is, the game communicates this very well by saying that there are a lot of breakable walls in this game that have strawberries in them. And the thing is, they also communicate that each level will probably have one cassette level, incentivizing you to break walls in very creative ways. But the thing is, never has the game ever presented any other puzzle sequences aside from these 2 instances. At least from my experience, and maybe there are more puzzles in the game, but I never encountered them. So, even if it's obvious for some, it certainly won't for others. And for the people who figured it out immediately, then good on you. But I think it's also fair to not expect it. And I guess there is one more puzzle, and it's this puzzle. And you see, I never really played Mario 3, so I was genuinely stumped here. I tried everything that I could. I tried like bashing it. I tried going up and down. I tried crouching on it. And there was just nothing that's working. So I genuinely just decided to look it up. Now, the thing is, this isn't really a major problem overall, and it's certainly an extremely good game for something this small to be one of the 2 problems I had with it throughout my whole entire experience with it. Even some of my favorite games of all time, I had a long list of things that I didn't like about it, but with this game, it really only had 2, and that's extremely impressive to me. I will say though, my favorite part of Heart Hunting was definitely feeling how much I've grown when it comes to platforming. Like, to put things into perspective, I think I died over 200 times in the first chapter alone, since I was just that bad at platformers. And now that I'm looking for these hearts and these strawberries, these jumps are just second nature to me. It just made me see how far I've come. So after collecting all of the hearts in every level, I finally was ready to tackle chapter 8, and I wasn't ready. Now, another thing that Celeste does extremely well is adding mechanics that seem very little but actually have a massive impact in how you play. For example, dashing out and jumping at the very end of these shimmering things gives you so much speed and distance that it changed how I played this game after finding out that this existed. Because after this, I started experimenting with jumps in general. What if I jump very precisely in this sliding up thing in chapter 8? What if I jump immediately after I dash? These sorts of things added so much to the game even though it seems very little. But for the very first time, Celeste did something different. It removed something from the player, and that's the ability to charge your dash after landing. And to me, this changed Celeste completely. You see, so far I've been playing Celeste more as a go now and think later kind of game, since dashes provided so much of a big window for adapting to situations. Chapter 8 for me changed that, since to me Chapter 8 was more of a puzzle game, where you had to figure out where you need to use your dash and only to do it when you absolutely need it. Now you'd think that I'd hate this because of my views on Limbo, but I actually still really liked it. And it proved to me that Celeste is just really good at executing the concepts that it wants the player to experience. And I will say that there are a couple of really stand-up moments in this chapter for me. One of them is this feather scene. There's another thing that you need to know about me for this experience to even make sense. And that is, I've been playing Celeste on an off-brand controller. And the thing is, I'm really not used to playing controllers. The only time that I actually get to use them is probably when I'm fighting games, or if I'm playing on my Switch. So it's safe to say that I'm more comfortable with using mouse and keyboard. Now, why did I play on controller in the first place? I honestly don't know. But in this level, you have to have precision movement when it comes to this feather, because the obstacles aren't static with this one. There's a reason why Chapter 3 was always my worst performing stage. So yeah, I got stuck in this level for a really long time. And the thing is, I think this was actually the biggest wall I had to face throughout my whole gameplay of Celeste. Because unlike in every other level wherein the longer I played, the more I actually progress and become more consistent, this wasn't the case with this one. My performance with the screen wasn't improving, and my consistency with the controller was just non-existent with the feather. And I also thought that it was probably already too late to switching to keyboard, because that would ruin all of the game sets that I've built up throughout my whole entire gameplay of Celeste. So I came up with an extremely scuffed solution. That is to have my left hand control the dash via controller, and have my right hand control my movement via the keyboard. Now, this sounds absurd, but it actually worked. It worked too well, actually, that I was even debating if I should really switch to keyboard. But I thought that it would be like throwing away all of my progress, so I stuck to my controller at the very end. I might regret this later. But to me, this was really the only level wherein I really faced such a big obstacle in. The other levels were just similar to the other chapters of Celeste, wherein there were difficult streams for me, but as soon as I figured out how to crack them, I managed to get consistent runs out of them. Sure, it took me a long time to do it, but I actually did it. So after this feather scene, there's only really one screen left until I finally finished Chapter 8. Now, after Chapter 8, I had the option to either play Chapter 9 or go back and do all the Side B content and even get the strawberries. Now, I opted to doing the Side B content first because I wanted Farewell to be my final Celeste stage. Surely not for any other reasons than that, right? Okay, honestly, I think I'm just not good enough for Farewell yet, so I need to practice my skill first. But anyway, I have a short PSA here. Addiction is a very serious condition. I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, so trust me when I say that it's fine spending 4 hours on Chapter 3 B-side instead of reviewing for a board examination that's coming next week. I promise it's not an addiction, and I swear I can stop whenever I want. But in all seriousness, going into Chapter 1 Side B, I thought that I would kick this stage's ass, since I thought that I grew so much and that the B-side of the first level should be a cakewalk. Hey, I'll probably finish this in about 30 minutes, right? Then I was suddenly brought back to reality. But in all honesty, the first two B-sides weren't really too bad. This was still within the expected time considering my skill in the game, and I actually had a really fun time with it. Now, Chapter 3 is where I felt the B-side energy to the core. Now, Chapter 3, as I said before, has always been my worst performing chapter, and it's probably my least favorite chapter. Now, I have no criticisms towards it, I'm just really bad in this chapter specifically. I think I'm just weak to so many moving obstacles, and B-side ramps that up to like 50. Like, my god, it took me like 4 hours to complete this whole entire chapter. Like, Jesus Christ, these 3 screens in particular were brutal to me. Especially this one that took me an hour to do, and the thing is, I don't get it. This actually felt a lot easier than the other 2, but it took forever to do. I just didn't really get why I took so much time with this one, honestly. As for chapter 4, well, we'll speak more about that in a bit. But first, what really surprised me about B-Side's contents was that it was really interesting how well balanced this whole game was. I think that the difficulty curve of Celeste was very smooth, with a small spike in chapter 3, at least for me. Across my whole entire journey of A-Side, I never felt like the screen was impossible for me to do. Like, sure, I felt like jumping off a cliff sometimes, but it was never impossible that I had to look up a guide to finish the level. But the thing is, if I saw some of the B-side screens in A-side, I would have had a heart attack. I wouldn't even be surprised if I decide to take a break from that point on. But the thing is, I think the game has done an extremely good job at balancing this so that it hooks the player into the game, making them crave for a lot more gameplay. I think if this was done poorly, it might have had the opposite effect, and I felt like it would probably be more of a reach game, but since B-side is more of a self-inflicted challenge, it never really felt that way. Now, let's talk about B-side Golden Ridge is probably my favorite chapter of the B-side so far. This chapter had so many really complex and really cool screens that it just made me gush about it. Of course, during that moment, I wasn't really gushing about it, but I was having a blast actually playing these. But the thing is, it actually physically pushed me to my limit. I had to divide Golden Ridge into 3 separate days because my hand actually started to hurt. But unlike the last time wherein it was only my thumb wherein it was developing calluses, it was actually my whole left hand this time, including my wrist. That's mainly why I decided to take a break, not only from my B-side escapades, but from Celeste, because I really wanted to avoid an unironic carpal tunnel incident. But the funny thing is, even though I was actually getting physically hurt in this instance, I was still having a lot of fun. It was mostly because of how cool it was to see each screen becoming more complex from the last one. So even though the complexities of each screen and the difficulty of the overall game keeps increasing by a landslide, the feelings of accomplishment also gets multiplied tenfold. Almost every single screen in Golden Ridge was like that for me. I kept wanting to go further beyond because every time I finished a screen, it felt like the pain was so worth it. Now, some might ask if it really is worth all this hassle and all this pain just to get through all of these screens. And I will say that every single death is worth these moments. No way! God damn! Bro! Oh god. Whoa! Oh my god. That was smooth! Oh no! Now, before I end this video, I'll explain my final complaint in Celeste, since earlier I said that the heart locations were my one of 2 problems with this game. And it's literally the fact that it hasn't allowed me to review a single goddamn thing about abnormal psychology. I really wasn't kidding when I said that I had a board examination in a couple days. It's literally in a week. And you know what's funny? This might actually unironically be the main reason why I even failed my board examinations in the first place. But anyway, thanks for watching. See ya.